Podcast excellence since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
The James Bond franchise has been captured by the auspices of Zon, Amazon.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Oh, expect this cliche. Yes, the James Bond franchise and everybody that respects and loves the James Bond franchise are shaken and stirred because of the fact that Amazon now has full autonomy over the whole franchise. Let's go through the announcement real quick, and we'll go through some context here that I want to go and give into. Amazon MGM Studios announced a new joint venture with the people behind the James Bond franchise, Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. So those three entities today announced they have a new joint venture to house the James Bond intellectual property rights. The parties will remain co-owners of the franchise, but under the terms, Amazon MGM Studios will now have creative control of the James Bond franchise following the closing of the transaction. We know that it was Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman that brought James Bond to the movie theaters around the world. Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli continued the legacy of the franchise and have been cherished by legions of fans worldwide. Michael Wilson makes a point and says, with my 007 career spanning nearly 60 incredible years, I am stepping back from producing the films to focus on art and charitable projects. Therefore, Barbara and I agree it is time for our trusted partner to lead James Bond into the future. So, the James Bond legacy, intellectual property, that all given part as Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM was acquired by Amazon in 2022, which already had for MGM a vast catalog of 4,000 films, more than 4,000 films, and 17,000 TV shows. And with that, Amazon got the rights to the James Bond films. Now they have creative control over future productions. This is scary. It's one of the last bastions of cinema that we have that has been untouched, that has relatively been kept under good creative control. Now, I can say yes. We can all have an argument about the best Bond, the best movies, and what they've done. I will say without a shadow of a doubt that, I've enjoyed many of the Bond movies, especially towards the later part. Growing up, Roger Moore was the Bond that I was familiar with the most. And if I go back and look at the films that have been put out there, I watched Dr. No, Goldfinger, and Diamonds Are Forever from the Sean Connery era. I've missed the other ones. I know. How horrible am I that I've missed those movies, but I have. But some of those movies are also kind of scary. They're pretty horrifying. They're really violent and really stand out on you when you watch that. I'm pretty sure I might have seen You Only Live Twice. And then the Roger Moore era, I never watched on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I do want to watch that. Roger Moore era, I did not see Live and Let Die. I did see Man with the Golden Gun, Spy Who Loved Me. I missed Moonraker. And then everything else after this I saw. For Your Eyes Only, I saw Octopussy, View to a Kill. Timothy Dalton era, I actually liked Timothy Dalton. Extra violent, and those sort of movies are fine. I preferred License to Kill over Living Daylights, personally. But Living Daylights had the better theme song, right? And then Pierce Brosnan, the transition from Remington to Steel, yeah, I got no problem with him. He, everybody can have a good feeling about Pierce Brosnan because he embodied like the real gentleman that James Bond was. And somehow did include a bit of what Sean Connery gave because he wasn't so menacing and brooding. So there was that. And that was good. GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, World Is Not Enough, Die Another Day. I don't hold those movies as strong, but I will say that behind Sean Connery, and I think probably tied with Roger Moore, is Daniel Craig. I really like what he did in the role as Bond. And 5 movies, by the way: Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, No Time to Die. And I must say, too, when they resurrected the franchise after Pierce Brosnan's era and they brought it back once more, I enjoyed what they did. I thought a good part of the songs they did on these were good. Well, probably the last couple. Like, I enjoyed Adele doing Skyfall and Sam Smith doing his song, and then Billie Eilish doing No Time to Die. I liked all those songs. The best, you know, it's kind of even hard to go and see which one was the best theme song too, because it's going to be for me View to a Kill, Duran Duran, but then tie that with Goldfinger and Shirley Bassey, because that's just a great song, right? And Thunderball is great, Tom Jones, right? Diamonds Are Forever, also Shirley Bassey. You got to put there almost like in the second place and like almost like honorable mention to the top. That's where I'm at with all that. That's my understanding, my feeling when it comes to what they did with the Bond movies. They're just good movies, just like, you know, I mean, I enjoyed the action. It's, of course, a very masculine, very traditional kind of feel to it. And that's the part that we're all afraid of. Because the presentation of James Bond, we already know that with all these other major studios, that they take a particular franchise, whether it's Indiana Jones, or they take Star Wars, or they take Superman, or Batman, whatever it is. Like, there's always these things that are being added in to progressively move these movies forward. As if there's something about the fact that James Bond can still be a particular character. Now, when we looked at what they did with, I'll say this, okay? What they did with No Time to Die and having basically the female 007, I enjoyed the character, but I also don't want her to become James Bond. What I want is exactly what they did with John Wick. Give me a female John Wick. You give me Ballerina. So with James Bond, from the annals of 007, give me a 007 that's a woman. But do not make it James Bond. Do not turn James Bond female. Keep it as is. But please, if you want to spin off to a female agent, go right ahead. And I will watch. I will be there first in the theater. No problem with that. But also then keep it in the same way as well. Like, can I say, go ahead and, you know, you want to have a female Bond in a female-led movie? Then let's get a Bond man if you want to do that, okay? You go find some guy that you want to have that'll be part of this. That'll be the whole embodiment of the movie as well. You want to do it? Go ahead. And most importantly, keep it in the format. Give me a strong villain. Give me a heinous, diabolical villain, of which there were many. I think Christoph Waltz did really well as Spectre. But I will, of course, original, you know, Blofeld or Goldfinger or, you know, I mean, there were others that were just enjoyable, right? And some were also kind of like, some of the actors that played the parts, like I will enjoy, like Robert Davi in License to Kill with Benicio del Toro as like just some mad, frothing madman. That was good. And I think also A View to a Kill with Christopher Walken. Zorin. Oh, loved that. Louis Jourdan and Octopussy. Loved that too. It's just things like that I really enjoyed. And came out. Yaphet Kotto, right? And The Spy Who Loved Me. Was it that one or the Man with the Golden Gun? I forget. No. Christopher Lee was Man with the Golden Gun. And then Yaphet Kotto was Spy Who Loved Me. That's what it was. So I did see Spy Who Loved Me. I just remember that movie just like really just got me like in a weird way because of the way it, you know, I remember Yaphet Kotto's head just like expands and he explodes. And like imploded inside because he took a pill. That just kind of irked me because it was like, it was not gore because you couldn't see it, but still was enough for me to just like, I'm a little bit off of that. Now, as for Amazon and what they've done with their franchises, we can all be concerned about if they decide to go ahead and take the franchise now and they're going to start to tinker with it. The thought that they might decide to create a TV series, which will have no budget compared to what they have already. I mean, listen, I've seen what they do on Amazon. Some of the Prime Video stuff is actually really good. Bosch has been very good. Reach has been very good. Of those shows I know of, I know there's others that are out there that people are really happy about in the science fiction area and all this. I don't know all the shows on Prime Video, but I will say that they do put some effort and some budget into their programming. They have, but to make it such a good thing and try to go ahead and take James Bond into television? I don't think they could do that. And I don't know what they're going to do to kind of set off of there. Because that's the part I don't understand either. Like, what are you going to do to kind of expand some kind of universe with Bond? Like, what are we going to do? Like, the Secret Service, we're going to have, like, other agents? I don't know if we want that. I don't know what they could do to get there. Like, if they want to do a female Bond, all right, fine. But we don't need it on television. Put it on TV and put it on movies. Get out there and make it a feature film. Do not relegate this to streaming. Don't do that either. Now, as for Amazon, what they've done and what they've done for programming, they've done a couple of things that in their time with MGM in 2023. So it was 2022 that they got the $8.5 billion to buy MGM Studios. And they did put out 2 movies that went theatrical. Actually 3 technically, but Air was put out. That was a Nike Air Jordan story with Ben Affleck and Chris Tucker, among others who were in that. Matt Damon was in it, right? I think. So that was good, and it was critically acclaimed. It did pretty well at the box office. Didn't make a boatload of money, but it did stay out there for a little while. I think for like a month. And then they put it right over to streaming, which is fine. Creed 3 wasn't always under Amazon's control during production because it was already in production beforehand and distributed by MGM. And it was sitting there for the theatrical release. Creed 3 was fine. I actually enjoyed Creed 3, figuring the fact that you go to the third one, and then unfortunately the opponent for Creed is like, basically ruined his career with all the stuff that he did. So like, that's unfortunate. But it doesn't take away from the movie itself. Creed 3 was actually quite good. I really did enjoy it. Then they had Saltburn. And Saltburn, like, I watched it on streaming, and I'll tell you, I think it would have been crazy if I would have watched it in the theater with all the stuff that was going on. About as gross as The Substance, too, in its own ways. But that movie was definitely standout. Premiered at the Telluride Film Festival, released on Prime Video. But it did get a little bit of a short theatrical run, very limited, but I got to see it. I just missed it in theaters. It just didn't really get a chance. That's okay. And other movies that were notable they have were Sitting in Bars with Cake and A Million Miles Away. I believe Michael Pena starred in A Million Miles Away. I remember seeing that trailer, but I never was interested in that story. Now, of course, with the MGM legacy, Amazon was able to go and have all this content on Prime Video or on their streaming channels for their Amazon, service. You have all this MGM content, all these TV shows that could go and repurpose. All that's in there for their own streaming to make Prime Video even built up and bulked up more. So that was fine. That made sense. But at the moment, that's where they're at. That's what they decided to go and go. But they haven't taken any real risks. But people were very concerned about what James Bond will be after this. So I want to go into the industry rags. There's so much being reported on it. It's time to go ahead and just see what was going to happen about this all together. Now, of the rags that are out there, the industry rags, there were several stories that came out from Hollywood Reporter. I want to take from them first. Amazon's TV and movie track record are causing fandom worries about the future of Bond. And there were quite a few critics that talked about when Amazon got the control over this, that, quote, it was absolutely heartbreaking, the end of an era. Another says this is quite possibly the worst thing to happen to the franchise. It'll be milked dry. Another says Amazon is going to scrape the barrel here and be as shameless as possible. And plenty of others writing R.I.P. James Bond. Now, one of the things I can respect is that Barbara Broccoli was always holding a protective grip on the character, following the footsteps of her late father, Albert R. Broccoli, or Cubby. And they were credited for the franchise's enduring appeal as its largely successful evolutions over 8 decades. One of the last beloved pieces of beloved intellectual property not controlled by a major corporation, free of unwieldy TV spinoffs, over-explaining prequels, or complicated serialization. Just to give a little bit of context here, Amazon spent $300 million creating their own type of British spy drama in Citadel, and that was with, was it Priyanka Chopra, and I forget who else was in it. And the series did launch in 2023 to soft reviews, meager audience scores, and Amazon conceived the show not just as a series, but an instant franchise, and they did spin-off shows for various countries worldwide and characters that would eventually all team up. And it was Amazon first conceiving a global content plan, attempting to write a TV show to fit the vision, which is rarely how compelling storytelling were working. They wanted to try to build something out of this. Now, the other action dramas they have been Jack Ryan or Reacher, which are fine, no shade, just very much TV. And then the other thing they did with Amazon was the Lord of the Rings prequel. So the resulting show right now is The Rings of Power. It's been divisive among fans, to say the least, albeit still popular in terms of streaming numbers. But one thing that's been talked about extensively over the past few years since Amazon took over was the clashing between Barbara Broccoli, Michael G. Wilson, and Amazon. Barbara Broccoli once described Amazon executives as fucking idiots, and she was reportedly incensed by executives dismissing referring to James Bond as just content. And they had contemplated TV spin-offs based on the character Moneypenny or a female Bond series. And Broccoli arguably had it right when she controversially declared that Bond can be any race, but the character is male. He's basically idealized masculinity. A TV version of Bond is what? A more looking, expensive British version of Netflix's The Night Agent? Now, Amazon prioritizes Prime Video, the streaming service. The one example they talk about where it comes to where they give priority to Prime Video is because the movie Roadhouse, when they rebooted it with Jake Gyllenhaal. And I remember reading the story that Jake Gyllenhaal said, well, okay, we could give you $65 million and you could put it out in theaters. We'll put it out in a theatrical release. Or we'll give you $80 million and you put it on streaming. So Jake Gyllenhaal wanted the better budget. That's why he did it, and that's why it went to theater. It did not go to theaters. I think it would have been fine if it would have gone to theaters. Like, look, if I saw Flight Risk in the theater, I don't think I would have had a problem seeing Roadhouse on a January, February release schedule if they wanted to do that. But it's not a bad movie. It's fine. It's definitely not Patrick Swayze. It's a different movie. I guess very, what's the word I'm looking for? Loosely adapted on the Roadhouse character. Very loosely. It's a new version of it, just a new interpretation. Let's be honest. Amazon isn't a company that seems to value cinema. This is like Netflix. And that's unfortunate. The company opened its coffers to spend an unholy amount of money on a Bond project, but in terms of casting, few fans seem to trust the two-day shipping giant will make it a compelling choice. Now, there was a lot of flack about when Daniel Craig was picked to be the next Bond. Remember, out of everything else, there's always been the flack about who becomes the next James Bond. And Daniel Craig was criticized. I get it. The story here says right here now, he wasn't considered a safe choice at the time when he came out for 2006's Casino Royale. Wasn't well known, slammed for being blonde and a not matinee idol handsome. Now, when the Citadel show came out, Amazon cast Richard Madden coming out of BBC's action drama Bodyguard. Had fans online saying he should play the next James Bond. So, Amazon took a safe choice. Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, himself had already started down the wrong path publicly and asking after the announcement, who would you pick as the next Bond? As if eager to get an online focus group going. No. We do not need the fans to go ahead and determine. You give them the right person. That's what you do. One fan-friendly component of Bond is that all the films are self-contained, at least until the franchise attempted some degree of serialization in the last couple of movies, which critics and fans agreed largely didn't work. That was, the Daniel Craig stuff where they brought in the woman, I forget her name now, Léa Seydoux, right? And they had the whole story about him having a daughter and all this, right? And then he passes away. So I wasn't really big about that, but the movie stood out. That's fine. The other thing is that Amazon will not be content with making a standalone film every few years. One worry is the company will try to do something like Disney did with Star Wars and start building a big monstrosity out there. So everybody's kind of worrying about what's going to happen with Bond and what Amazon would actually do. There's still time because the deal has to close, but it's done. Daniel Craig is responding to what happened here with the James Bond franchise. He spoke with Hollywood Reporter. He says, "My respect, admiration, and love for Barbara and Michael remain constant and undiminished. I wish Michael a long, relaxing, and well-deserved retirement, and whatever ventures Barbara goes on to do, I know they'll be spectacular, and I hope I can be part of them." I get it, man. With Daniel Craig, I mean, it's good for him. He's got other things going on in his career. He's been doing some other movies. You know, he's got his Knives Out thing, and he's been doing other stuff. Like, he wants to not be stereotyped, which is fine. I get where he's going with that, and I think he's done a pretty good job with that. They're going to do another Knives Out, and also on the Netflix side. Put it in theaters, by the way. Next to Knives Out, put it in theaters. Enough of this other crap. I'm glad I saw Knives Out 2 in the theaters, and I thought it would have done very well if they would have kept it out there for a couple more weeks. But they don't, and I really am miffed that Netflix keeps doing that. Now, people that have been within the whole thing of the James Bond franchise, people within, one person actually said, which was someone that received the call from Barbara Broccoli, they said that the call, they likened to receiving a call about a death in the family. One of several people Deadline contacted also made a comment and says that, "I do think it's possible, quote, that if God had sent us a totally no-brainer Bond in the last couple of years, then it might be a different situation." But that's the thing, is that the Bond franchise, even with a change now, has held up. I don't think anybody is saying we're tired of Bond. I don't think so. I still watch those movies. I don't think it's been doing as well. I get what they're trying to say, where if Amazon takes over, they're going to try to go ahead and progress the character to make it much more mainstream. That's what they want to do. I don't know if I really want to see that or not, but I'm very concerned what they're going to do with that franchise altogether. Now, in the area they want to talk about from Variety, when they brought up the story, they say that Amazon MGM is keeping its cards close to the chest, partly because the deal, which is expected to close sometime this year, is still subject to regulatory approval, keeping all major creative decisions on ice for now. The most immediate concern is who will step in the void left by the Broccolis, because that's the thing that has to happen as well. Somebody has to come in and control this. So in the Marvel universe, Star Wars or DC, they have a Kevin Feige or a Kathleen Kennedy, or executives like James Gunn and Peter Safran, tasked with guiding the ship. And analysts say it's critical to ensure quality control. The head of film at Amazon, Courtney Valenti, says, well, she does have experience with Tiffany brands like Harry Potter from years at Warner Brothers, but overseeing streaming in addition to theatrical releases, will she need to hire another person to fully focus on Bond? There's a lot riding on the cinematic return of Bond, most financially lucrative properties. Global grossing $7.8 billion over 25 films over 7 decades. And as we know, Amazon has had a couple of success. They've had some critical success, but they've also put in some duds as well. Like, one of the movies I saw last year that was not great was Red One. And the company has struggled to launch the kind of broadly appealing films that tap the zeitgeist and earn money at the box office. And that's what they're trying to go for right now. They want to have a franchise they can go and bank on and is going to make money. Well, everybody's kind of struggling. Right? Captain America Brave New World, I don't know what the numbers were this past week, but I will say this. I did see it last week. What was it with like the first half hour of that movie that was like horrible? Because the sound of the action going on when they got into that house to try to go and grab the whatever the device was, when they go in there and like the punches sound bad, the guns sound bad, no CGI at all. The CGI is only left at the very end when they bring out Red Hulk for like the last 30 minutes, and that's it. Like, that's the only time I think I saw CGI. So they're not even like the whole work that they only have to take a movie that's like up to $300-400 billion, and they CGI the hell out of it. That's what I expected in Marvel movies. But this one was like, no, it felt like a TV show for the first hour plus. And then the last half hour, it felt like a movie. But I don't know, man. I'm concerned about that. Now, so far, again, $200 million budget. Excuse me, not billion. $200 million budget. And right now, it's just breaking $200 million. Going into its second week. That's not promising. And when it comes to the box office so far, its first week, $88 million. Domestic. And then I look at the drop in what there is. And remember, they're full capacity right now. 4,105 theaters across the board this last week. And then the numbers just kept dropping. day by day, down 32%, down 27, down 45, down 43, down 46. The numbers just keep dropping. They're going to run out soon. Like, I don't know how much, if they're going to have it yet out there for a month. Because it's not going to get held over. This movie's going to go ahead and drive off quickly. So that's not helpful. Then you got Thunderbolts coming up later this year. I don't know what that movie's going to do because it's not attached to anything. Like, there's some attachments to other parts of other movies, but like nothing much else. And then we get to what? We'll get to the point of the new Superman that comes out, which does look pretty good, but there are not a lot of big blockbuster movies that are really getting out there. They're going to make a big difference so far. That's struggling as we speak. And at the moment, let's put this out there as well. When you look at the theaters and what they're putting out in terms of movies, of what is out there so far for Amazon, they got Superboys of Malagon, which is a limited release next week. I don't even know what that movie is. And is there anything else out there now in the meantime that's going to be coming out from them that will be big? Oh, Working Man. Oh, that's a Jason Statham movie. That should actually do really good. March 28th. And after the success of The Beekeeper, I think Jason Statham should do just fine with that movie. So I actually look forward to that. And then I'm looking down here. They have The Accountant 2. That should actually do really well too. They're going to have a couple. Accountant is not that big of a movie that's going to really make a big difference, but it was good. Don't get me wrong. John Bernthal now working with Ben Affleck to do the whole setup. That actually doesn't look that bad. But if I go back down the rest of the year, there's not many movies that they're out there with that are pushing out a lot. After The Hunt, which will go limited and then go wide release in October. And then they'll have Sarah's Oil on Christmas Day. There's not much else. But now, looking at what we have in terms of big blockbuster movies that we might see that might do well, like right now we're still waiting for those big movies to start coming out yet. And I don't know what's going to happen yet. So I'm going to see a limited release movie called The Cleaner coming out. That's a Daisy Ridley movie. I'll catch that this weekend. And then Earth's Last Breath next week. That's Woody Harrelson. I forget who else is in it. And then March, we got Mickey 17. That's the Robert Pattinson movie. I've seen a lot of promotion for that. They're doing a lot more now for it. And then movie Novocaine, I'm going to probably see that. That'll be March 14th. Movie Black Bag is coming out as well. Alto Nights. So that's the Mafia movie that was coming out in March 21st. But the first big movie that'll be coming out of this year will be Disney's Snow White, which has gotten so much flack because Rachel Zegler. Right? What are you going to do, right? And then Working Man's March 28th, prior to Easter. Minecraft movie is in April. The Amateur drop comes out. The King of Kings. So there's a lot of Easter-related films coming up in April. Sinners comes out April 18th. Accountant 2 is April 25th. Thunderbolts May 2nd. Final Destination Bloodlines May 16th. So that'll probably get some people going. Memorial Day weekend will be hot because they'll have Lilo and Stitch. And Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. That starts off the summer music season. Karate Kid Legends comes up after that. Ballerina, Dangerous Animals come out together June 6th. How to Train Your Dragon, June 13th. 28 years later, June 20th. So a lot of horror movies coming out. F1 is June 27th. Mega 2.0 is June 27th. Jurassic World Rebirth, July 2nd for July 4th weekend. Superman, July 11th. Rehashing I Know What You Did Last Summer, July 18th. Fantastic Four First Steps, July 25th. Bad Guys 2. Naked Gun on August 1st. Freakier Friday, August 8th. Can't help themselves. Just got to keep bringing things back. Toxic Avenger. They're bringing that character back. August 29th. I didn't realize that, but I'll probably go see it. Conjuring Last Rite, September 5th. Downton Abbey 3, September 12th. The Bride, September 26th. Tron Ares, October 10th. Black Phone 2, October 17th. Mortal Kombat 2, October 24th. Predator Badlands, November 7th. Running Man, November 7th. And I still got to watch the original. I have not watched that. Now You See Me 3, November 14th. Wicked for Good, November 21st. Five Nights at Freddy's, December 5th. SpongeBob SquarePants, December 19th. Avatar Fire and Ash, December 19th. And on Christmas Day, Anaconda, Housemaid, among other movies that I'll have out there. So, Zootopia 2 is November 26th. Not a lot to like really sink your teeth into. There's nothing that really gives me like, wow, this is like big major event movie. Like there's not much of that this time. Still got remakes. Can't help themselves. But some have been a while in the time, and some just resurrect them out of nowhere. That's what they've been doing. So one media outlet has said that in this new joint venture, Amazon paid $1 billion to get the partial ownership, the other 50% of the ownership now. Amazon insiders said to The Wrap that the figure was based on the no facts, but would provide no details. Now, with Lord of the Rings, Amazon paid $250 million in 2017, and then another $750 million to fund production. $1 billion total. Now, some people are saying, what is Courtney Valenti, the head of film at Amazon, going to be doing when it comes to setting this all up? And some people are saying right now that, well, quote, I'm sure Courtney will call Christopher Nolan, Danny Boyle, Edward Berger next. As according to a top agent referring to the industry's top directors, Nolan said one of his dream projects was to make a Bond movie, only if he could start from scratch. Now, while she was at Warner Brothers, Valenti did oversee numerous successes, the final Harry Potter films, the Fantastic Beasts franchise, and critically acclaimed hits like Mad Max Fury Road and Elvis. So there's still a lot of talk about what would be the spin-offs. What would Amazon consider spinning off of the Bond franchise to make something of it? So Deadline takes a story about that, and they say that the last time a spin-off of the Bond franchise tried to be done was Halle Berry's character, the spy's girlfriend Jinx, in Die Another Day. And Bond describes Neil Purvis and Rob Wade were attached to pen that, with Stephen Frears circling, but Broccoli and Wilson put the kibosh due to creative differences. So they were going to go ahead and spin off Jinx. Yeah, I think people would have watched that. I probably would have gone and seen it too. Amazon will spend money to make a movie. They don't have any stakes. But for some people, they think that if this joint venture did not happen in closing, that Broccoli and Wilson would have kept fighting with Amazon and no new Bond movie would be in the horizon. That, according to this, a source familiar with the rift between Broccoli, Wilson, and Amazon says now, quote, now a new Bond movie can be delivered to a new generation much sooner. So the chance that we could see a Bond movie being put into production in the next couple of years, probably. Of the names they've been circulating, I know they said what? They were saying Tom Hiddleston, right? Or they were saying Aaron Taylor Johnson. I'm probably more leaning towards Aaron Taylor Johnson if they decide to go with him. They've always said about Henry Cavill. I don't know. I mean, I do like his character. And I've seen him kind of stretch himself out into other movies. And, you know, he's definitely trying to get away from that whole Superman mystique as well. So I get that part. Let's take the story now from the fact that Jeff Bezos put out on his Instagram about the fact of having the new Bond and the comments that were being made. Let me look what Instagram says right here of what some of the names that people are saying. And right away, Henry Cavill is one name. Actually, everybody was kind of hitting Henry Cavill quite a way around here from the very initial responses. I'm still seeing Henry Cavill. A lot of people seeing Henry Cavill. Wow. Interesting. Some people said Idris Elba. If you wanted to make the switch, you had to have done it maybe 5 years ago. Because I think Idris Elba is just too old to go and play that card now. He just can't do it now. And everyone keeps going through. There's Theo James has been considered. Aaron Taylor Johnson. Theo James once again. Well, there might be somebody that will come out of this. But so far, they're definitely saying Henry Cavill. Just off the first couple of hundred responses to that post. Interesting. But again, that's a small sample. A few other comments the Associated Press actually brought up about this that I want to go and take as well. Joe Russo, co-director of 4 Marvel Cinematic Universe films, including Avengers Endgame, pleaded to Amazon MGM, don't Cinematic Universe James Bond. Yes, Joe, I agree. Quote, it is one of our last great theatrical events. Don't dilute it with a plethora of streaming spin-offs. And Barbara Broccoli, when she received an honorary Oscar alongside her brother, told the Associated Press that in an era of upheaval in the movie industry, boldness was necessary. Quote, people are playing it very safe. I think in times of crisis like this, you got to be brave. And that's a standing for the rest of the movie industry. I mean, if you're going to have a franchise that can sustain, you can't just keep rehashing, rebuilding, or trying to make changes to it to try to appease some narrative. When you have something that works, you don't change it, you don't break it. But obviously, so much press about this today. A lot of the same stuff being reported as well. But what are you going to do? Like, they decided to go with it, and they make the point. And they did. So good on them. So I got a few other stories to go and tap into right now as we continue along. Just a little bit of a heads up of what we got coming up next. More talk about the American Music Fairness Act. That act is still getting press. I'm really pleased in seeing how this continues to keep going. Also, I think we're going to talk about the National Association of Broadcasters and talk about the ownership rules being relics of the past. Trump having a final say on all SEC decision making. We'll take that also as well. SiriusXM looking to YouTube and Spotify to help grow podcast subscribers. Odyssey launching their own premier networks now, Infinity Networks, among other things. So let's go into those stories real quick. So today's show talks about pay to play and the American Music Fairness Act. So this is today's show. I'll go and play this clip. Take a listen.
I would never have been exposed to your music if it weren't for the radio, right? So you benefited from that a little bit too, didn't you?
100%.
Yeah,
we definitely did, as well as the radio stations. But now that that's not where normal people find their music from, it's like it's about time to pay people.
They argue it's time the compensation structure changed with the new business dynamics by requiring radio stations to pay artists for the right to play their songs.
These new artists, you know, they never had to rely on radio. You know what I'm saying? They rely on streaming, TikTok, and all of the things that's going to get their music out there.
Social media, streaming services, and the internet give music lovers many platforms to find new artists.
Good morning, you're on the radio.
But for radio DJs like Bill Keeler in Utica, New York, the connection between pop music and radio is special.
Radio has been the place where music gets to promote its artwork.
Radio stations pay licensing agreements that then lead to royalties to the music publishers and songwriters, but the performers are left out. Keeler argues it's the record companies, not the radio stations, that need to fix that imbalance.
I'm sure they should make more money, but you don't take it from the hand that feeds you.
But the performers aren't counting on the record companies. More than 300 recording artists, from Carly Simon to Jelly Roll, joined Boyz II Men in sending a letter to Congress pushing for the change.
Now, I'm going to take more from the story, but I want to make this point as well, is that when this was put together, most importantly, with the record labels, I don't expect them to do anything to help out the artists. And they're not going to. But what I do say about this is that they should be working with the radio stations. When we talked last week about the payola issue, that was 2 weeks ago, that was being brought up about the fact that Music Row, you have all these artists that are now performing, and they're all taking a setup of free concerts, and the radio stations are being able to sell tickets and be able to go and monetize while putting airplay for these artists up for grabs and saying, hey, you need to play something free for us, for our audience, or else we're not going to play your songs on the radio. Like, where are the radio stations advocating for their artists? Listen, you don't want to go and help more. You want to deal the same bullshit contracts you have with your artists, fine. But do your job. Go to the record. I think this is the part where there was a point where, again, during COVID, if there was some changes that were being made where promotions were going to go more towards streaming, well, guess what? You're realizing you're not making the kind of money that you could on streaming. And then you abandon radio in the process. Now you need to go back and get radio to become relevant again. So record labels need to start spending money on advertising with these radio stations and putting money in so that these artists can be in the studio or connected with them or doing concerts with them so that something can happen. That needs to change too. But nothing has done that yet. That's something that also has to change. I think it's extremely important. Back to the story.
While Wanya, Nate, and Sean went all over Capitol Hill, meeting with senators and House leaders to make their case.
The system was a little weird, so it's only now in 2025 that people are actually seeing it, acknowledging it, and trying to right those wrongs.
I appreciate that, and Boyz II Men being part of that to go ahead and give that interview, so that was great. I'm glad we got something here to talk more about it. And I'm glad that NBC's Today Show decided to go and bring the story to light. Wonderful. They did pretty much a good idea on how they said this. But like I said, one thing I would take us to take away from this is that they need to go ahead and do something more about getting the record labels, that the record labels themselves need to go ahead and put more emphasis on the stations. I mean, part of the deal was for radio was they were able to go ahead and get revenue to prop up the radio stations. Like radio right now needs revenue from someplace. They should be relying on the record labels, especially when you have all these bona fide artists that you have. I think you can recreate this system because streaming is not a monopoly. Streaming doesn't control the whole market. I mean, listen, Billboard, to its credit, for radio stations, they still have kept radio to be really relevant because the methodology of the Billboard charts still make radio matter. And it can still be done that way. So this act still needs to come across. They didn't really talk much about the American Music Fairs Act. They just talked about the whole story about it. But at least it's out there. But they need to go and talk more about it. Like they explained the story about how radio stations operate right now. But they didn't really say much about what Congress needs to do about the act. They just said the Boyz II Men showed up. And they had this whole stand behind it. But people need to go ahead and start calling the congressman to make the American Music Fair Act the real deal, Holyfield. They need to get that passed. So do that. Call your local congressman and tell them that you want them to support the American Music Fairness Act and help artists. Because the deals when they have the licensing arrangements and the whole thing with the Copyright Royalty Board, and they're only getting such a flat rate on everything when the artists could getting more. And of course, remember my ulterior motive on this is the fact that I want the radio stations that are bigger corporate entities, they're going to have to break themselves up because they can't afford the royalties if that bill gets passed. And that'll be a great day. Curtis Legate, National Association of Broadcasters, he held the Media Institute's 2025 Communications Forum series and had an address for them. And he said this, quote, "The FCC should start by scrapping the national audience cap that hampers broadcasters' ability to stand up to global tech titans. Time to update the ownership rules for local TV and radio. Regulations are fossils from another era. FCC rules largely block TV broadcasters from owning two of the four top rated stations in the market, not the top four video services overall, just broadcast stations." And he wants to change that. Scrap the rules would let stations pull resources, bolster journalism, and better serve their audiences. More deregulation? Pass. Pass, Curtis. No. You can allow that once every radio company is above board. They're not holding such a gross amount of debt to where they don't have any leg to stand on as to why they are holding on the radio stations that should be let go so that the public can go ahead and buy those stations outright. All those nice class A, B, and C, 50,000, 25,000, 100,000 watt stations can be sold off to somebody else so they can make some real money on it. Because remember, a lot of these local stations I always talk about, they don't get the stations that are the big 100,000 watt sticks. They don't get to have those. But imagine if these corporate radio entities had to give up their 100,000 watt signals, 50,000 watt signals, serious coverage, and say iHeartRadio or Odyssey, they had to go and give up those stations because the royalties from American Music Fairness or whatever other regulations that are going on, the fact that, who knows, SEC, whatever there is, delisting from the stock exchange, all these different scenarios, and that private equity companies holding on to these stations and allowing them to go through bankruptcy, like the SEC is allowed to go ahead and just rubber stamp all the way through, like Jessica Rosenworcel did. That's what happened. Just saying. SEC news. SEC Chair Brendan Carr spent time with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago this past weekend. And now a new executive order by President Trump says that independent executive agencies, including the FCC, will be under more presidential supervision and control. The FCC will submit all draft regulatory actions for approval before they are made official with publication in the Federal Register. And that the new administration is going to increase regulatory officials' accountability to the American people with the president at the helm. The FCC will be required to appoint a liaison to work with the White House and develop a strategic plan to improve performance. And Carr will need to regularly consult and coordinate with the OMB, White House Domestic Policy Council, and the White House National Economic Council. And the talk is that White House involvement in FCC decision-making could be especially problematic for broadcasters. Critics say it could impact what regulations are printed on stations and how much fines are levied against an outlet that has run afoul of the president. This directive will also cover the Federal Trade Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The executive order will expect to be facing legal challenges, so we know about that as well. All right, one other thing, two more things I'll tell you about. Odyssey launching Infinity Networks. So they're going to have their own syndication arm. A network services and content platform making best-in-class shows, talent, and content available to other broadcasters. Premier Networks is already like that for iHeartRadio, and Westwood One is already doing that for Cumulus, among others. So that's all being set up. And so with some of the shows, they already have a couple of music shows that are morning shows that are going to be put out there. 2 national dated country shows, Kenny and Company and The Robin Holly Show, which are being done in-house. Those are the 2 shows they're going to have right away. So in-house syndication. I think it's a little bit late to go and get to this point, but all right. I mean, I don't know if that really makes much of a difference to me, if I feel like it's going to do anything at all, but okay. Now, Lance Venta over Radio Insight put out a response about what Curtis Legate said in his address that I just mentioned to you. And he makes a point here that he says that the issues we're facing are not unique to the United States, Canada, or United Kingdom, because we're seeing always massive cutbacks and nationalization of commercial radio programming. When given the opportunity to listen to Madcap Mike in the Morning Madhouse or someone like Howard Stern or Joe Rogan, listeners are going to choose the better program, regardless of where it is based, especially when they can listen on demand to nearly anything everywhere. Radio as a whole failed to adapt and invest in the future when it needed to. That has now come back to hurt it. So when Station X in a market does something to drive up people and listen to other platforms, it's going to hurt the rest of the market that were P2s and P3s. Year over year, CUME has continued to drop over the past decade. It's just a point. Radio in 2025 cannot be done the way it was in 1965, 85, or 2005. There are too many other options for advertisers and listeners. But local commercial FM monopolies is not the solution either. Radio has stopped creating the most compelling content for listeners except in emergencies such as a hurricane or the Los Angeles wildfires, for example. If it wants the audience back, we need to figure out how to provide that all the time and on platforms people want to use. So, yeah. And on Radio Insight, they actually give a transcript of the entire speech that he gave, which wasn't too long. But, again, we don't need more consolidation. We don't need more deregulation. No, pass. Pass on that. Finally, SiriusXM is looking to YouTube and Spotify to help grow podcast subscribers. They now have an offering that's going to go to YouTube Music and Spotify for SiriusXM Podcasts Plus, which they were going to be setting up to get more people to go on. It's been launched as of August, and it gives subscribers ad-free listening on new episodes, bonus content, and early access to episodes of popular shows. So, in that premium podcast package, you have Smartless, Freakonomics Radio, Last Podcast to the Left, and 99% Invisible. Now they're going to include Caller Daddy, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, Rotten Mango, The Mel Robbins Podcast, and more. Expansion will start February 19th. It's already here. And subscription will be available through SiriusXM Podcast Plus for $5.99 a month and $44.99 annually. There's it. So SiriusXM needs to find other places to go to get their subscriptions. So they're going to offer it and make it available on YouTube and Spotify. That's a smart move for them. They should do that. Because I think just going to stand alone. And, they're doing that just so they can have it where it's available at other places that are more comfortable for people. Which makes sense. Because I don't know if SiriusXM is doing really well with their app yet, if that's really taken off the ground. Plus, they got to still work on their own content on their own radio projects. Like their regular service. They got to get subscribers back up. So, if you got to branch yourself out to other places, probably not a bad idea to go ahead and go to that as well. Figure out what you can do. All right, anyway, that's for the show tonight. Thanks for listening in. Hey, take a look at the redesign of kingofpodcasts.com. I put all the podcasts up there, social media links and all that good stuff. Recent episodes, all that stuff. Go ahead and check it out for that for yourself. Also, go to my YouTube channel at King of Podcasts and please help me get to 500 subscribers. That would help a lot. Come back next week for another Broadcasters Podcast because content is king and the control of your content is in your hands.